Some housekeeping before we get started. We have 2 big Substack live streams this week. First, I'll be podding with my Wednesday co-host, Aaron Parnas, on The Raging Perspective. That's this Wednesday and every Wednesday at noon Eastern. And then on Thursday, I'm going live with Brian Tyler Cohen. We'll be talking about why Republicans have been so effective at wielding power, why Democrats have often failed to use the power they have, and what the left must do to govern in a post-Trump era. That is a preview. That's what his book is about. His book is awesome. I have read it. I have also written a blurb. That's how much I liked it. You won't want to miss it. That's this Thursday, July 9th. Kicks off at 11:45 a.m. Eastern. To catch it live, sign up at ragingmoderates.profgmedia.com or click the link in the show notes. Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm JessicaTarlov, and because he's not here to tell you that he's on a yacht, I will tell you that Scott is on a yacht off the coast of Sardinia. And Samstein, the managing editor of the Bulwark, MS Now contributor, is filling his... I don't even know actually how large Scott's shoes technically are, but they are, in podcasting world, they are enormous. So,
Pretty
Sam,
big.
Thank you. Pretty big.
Yeah, I wish I was on a yacht too, but I'm not, unfortunately.
Sam, I'm thrilled to have you here. It is a big day in politics in general, but especially in Democratic politics. And I want to start with what's going on with Graham Platner. Jenny Rassicott, who dated him in 2021, detailed a rape scenario to Politico, got published yesterday about 3 p.m. She was one of the women that the New York Times had spoken to for their big piece. There's lots of swirl online, especially from Lindsay Fifield, who did come forward with her story about Platner pulling her arm behind her back and shoving her into a bedroom, that this was one of the stories that they could have done more work to be able to bring to light. Even though Rassicott said in her interview with Jake Tapper yesterday that she didn't want to be known as a rape victim. If Graham Platner drops out of the race by July 13th, then the Democratic Party in Maine has a chance to appoint someone else to be the candidate to face off against Susancollins. That has to happen by July 17th. There are a lot of possible replacements, including Secretary of State Shanna Bellows, former Maine Senate President Troy Jackson. He seems to be the favorite of the progressive left right now. Former Public Health Director Nirav Shah and former congressional candidate Jordan Wood. Kalshi currently has the odds of Platner dropping out by Thursday at 58%. I kind of feel like it's today. They have also that we still have a 57% chance of winning the seat. Susancollins scares me. What are your initial thoughts on where all of this stands?
I mean, that's just a lot. Where to begin? I guess the most important thing is the non-political stuff, which is that if you read the account in Politico of what happened and transpired, I mean, regardless of whether you want to define it as sexual assaults, or rape or whatever, it's disturbing, deeply disturbing. And it's not that it's an act in a vacuum. It's obviously part of a pattern of behavior that now has become just nothing that you could possibly dismiss. And I'm not going to pretend like I've been sort of banging on the door saying Platner has to go. I think, on a personal level, I was willing to sort of give the guy a little space to explain some of the stuff in his past. Obviously, as a Jew, I was troubled by the tattoo, and yet I was willing to say, okay, maybe he didn't understand why he got that tattoo, a Nazi symbol tattoo, and certainly there's nothing that I've seen from him that is like Nazi behavior beyond that. But it's at some point the pattern of the behavior and the repeated sort of denials saying, well, this isn't really true and it's the fog of memory, it adds up. And it says something about the character in a way that's obviously, I think, disqualifying at this juncture. So that's the personal stuff, and I think that's the most important stuff. The political stuff is a mess. And, I've spent yesterday talking to people in the Democratic Party about it and what the hell to do about it. And, to a person, no one thinks he can go on. And I think those Kalshi odds are kind of like almost hysterically low, right? Like 58%. I guess maybe they're doing the odds by Thursday. Okay, yeah. So they're pointing to the date. If you're just saying he's going to drop out by the 13th, I'd put those odds at what, 95%? I mean, it's just...
I'm kind of at 99.9%.
Yeah, it's okay. I was giving like a little wiggle room for ego where he's like, you know what, I can make this happen. But no, he can't win. He just can't win. And so the question now becomes what to do about it. And I was talking to people who worked on, the weird analogy obviously is now like what happened with Biden in 2024, obviously different contexts and circumstances, but like, what do you do when you have a candidate who pretty much everyone's like, they can't win, we got to get them off the ballot? It's not easy, obviously, because if you choose someone who is a more quote unquote seasoned politician, and by that I mean someone who's been vetted, who's been around the block, who's in politics and has been, then people who really like Graham Platner, who were brought into the process precisely because he wasn't a politician, suddenly they become disengaged. They say, well, this is just the establishment doing their thing again. If you go with someone who's less tested but has more grassroots support, you obviously risk getting into this situation again where you don't have a vetted candidate and you're just holding your breath hoping that there's not skeletons in the closet. And yet you have to do some sort of change. And I was talking to Rob Flaherty about this. He was Kamala Harris's top digital director. And he's like, look, it was awful. It was hard. But had we not switched to Kamala Harris, we lost obviously, but had we not switched to Kamala Harris, we would have lost a number of Senate seats in 2024. Like, you have to make the change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I should note as well, Graham Platner denies these allegations, but does acknowledge that essentially the position is untenable and he's taking the time to reflect on all of this.
I wanted to directly address the troubling, serious, and false allegations against me. Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false, regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict. We are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susancollins. Those were the goals when we launched this campaign, and they remain my goals today. Every one of you deserves to see that vision come to fruition and see Susancollins defeated, and we will use every tool at our disposal to do so.
The account is very disturbing on a number of levels, but I have not spoken to one woman of any political persuasion since this came out who doesn't recognize that scenario. And I think that's why it hit particularly hard and it was so swift for everyone to just be like, this guy's got to go. And right. I'm not saying that every woman was raped or would allege that they were raped, but the idea of someone who you were in a situationship with, which is how she called it, and you didn't want them to come over and they came over anyway. And I think her phrase was, I complied, but I didn't consent, is something very resonant with a lot of people. And I guess I shouldn't make it only women, because I'm sure the same things happen to men, but in most cases, when you are dealing with a huge size differential and, the alcohol being involved, it's just, it's different. And I can see why this felt palpably different to folks. In terms of what comes next and the politics of it, I'm curious as to how you feel about the internal party dynamics in this, because there is, for me, as someone as part of like the more normie wing, right? Or they call me, I'm a corporatist Dem or whatever, establishment Dem.
You're an establishment sellout normie Dem. Come on.
Legacy media, like all the things. Well, I guess a pod and, we both pod and cable news. So, but it feels like there is a lesson in this about doing the real work of vetting. Right. And we all watched the interview with, like this Daniel Maraff, the guy who found Graham Platner and was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Right. And they said, oh, the tattoo didn't come up. And he's like, no, it didn't come up at all. And you're like, well, K-File found it in like 20 minutes. Right. Like he wrote about the thing on Reddit. So like, what did your vetting actually look like? And the left, sans Bernie Sanders, who is still, as time of this taping, has not released a statement. It was very swift, like, get out of here, right? Hassan Piker was done with it. But now they're saying it has to be Troy Jackson, And,
Why?
well, because he's the heir to the quote unquote movement, or that's what they're saying. And I appreciated Hannah Pingree's statement. She's the Democratic nominee for governor, where she said he has to get out, but acknowledged that he built something, right? Like that there is a vibe and a movement of sorts happening, and you can't just put in like a Janet Mills, which is out of the
Sure.
question. But this is making me angry all over, I guess, about the accommodating of the big tent and like how we actually deal with the tent, because this is a strike against this is what the people want.
Well, let's talk about that. What is the movement? I'm not trying to dismiss like what he built, because obviously he had a really great following, but also at the same time, I think we should be honest about like no one knew who this guy was a year ago. So what is the movement? Like what? With Bernie, it's a little bit different, like, because, and everyone's, points to Bernie as kind of the emblem here, but like Bernie was a mayor and then a congressman and then a senator, and he had decades of championing these ideals. He pushed for Medicare for all, getting money out of politics. He railed against billionaires and millionaires in his Brooklyn accent. Like there was some sort of meat to the bone on the movement, right? Like, so what is the Platinum? I'm going to pose the question to you. What is the movement that we're talking about here? Is it about the person? Because we just met this guy a year ago. I'm not trying to denigrate. Well, I guess I can now, but I'm not
I think
saying
he's
about him.
denigratable
Yeah.
at this point.
Okay. But like, or is it the ideals? Because plenty of people are talking about the same ideas that he's talking about. So what is the movement? I just don't understand this a little bit.
Well, I think that it is the agenda that is encapsulated in a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren. And in defense also of some more moderate Democrats, they're talking about a lot of the same things, right? Like it's now not uncommon to find like a Ruben Gallego, right? Who's like, we got to shut down the border. Also, let's do Medicare for all, right? Like it's become a bit of a mishmash of these policies. But I think that it is definitely as progressive as possible on things like taxation and, what the state or the city should provide for you. Like I'm in New York City, all the Mom Donnie type of stuff. It is a war against centrism in general, right? So that could be Democratic centrism, and it could also be Republican centrism plus Trump, and it's also Israel.
Yeah.
And that was a core plank of this. I mean, it was a top 3 thing that Graham Platner was talking about, and you see that in races all over the country. I want to talk about Michigan as well. Abdul El-Sayed was talking about it all the time, and Mallory McMorrow really got herself boxed in because she didn't know how to talk about Israel. She couldn't do a Haleystevens, and she couldn't do an El-Sayed, and she ended up having to drop out.
So if any Maine Democrat had those 3 planks in their platform, critical of AIPAC, critical of establishment moderation, pro-Medicare for all, would they be fine as a Platner replacement, or is it attitudinal too in the way that you kind of go about campaigning?
I think it has a vibes situation to it. And then also it has a consultant in common, right? Morris Katz, who's been on a lot of these campaigns. And it's a burn it all down mentality, and that progress is not slow but certain. I think that that is very fundamental to Democratic politics for a very long time, right? You remember the whole, is Hillary Clinton a progressive? And she said, yeah, because I believe in progress. Right. And that's what I'm working towards. And you have to get into the system to change the system. And they're like, I want to get into the system and I want to smash the shit out of it. Right. Yeah. And I think that's what the movement is.
Yeah. But that's to me, this is the great irony here. Because like, again, pointing to Bernie Sanders, because obviously he is the godfather of all this. Bernie is, has a lengthy track record of being an incrementalist. He does. I mean, it's just true. Like Bernie was involved in VA reform under Obama, and he worked with John McCain on it. And it was about making sure that there were a little bit more, not private options, but more flexibility around VA care. And it's the type of thing that, like, if anyone else did it, people would be like, what the hell? Bernie cast votes for Obamacare. This is the guy who is Medicare for all. But he understood that you get there piece by piece. But Bernie built up credibility, and he cast that vote because he understands that you can't just say all or nothing when it comes to legislation. So, it's funny to me that there's such this burn it all down mentality when, to your point, progress is the ultimate, North Star here. I guess the only other thing I would say, I'm not trying to be, argumentative or contrarian here. I just find I struggle with sort of understanding what the movement is, because I think there's a lot of candidates who would, be pretty damn close to those planks that have animated the sort of populist Democrats in the current times, but they would never get the attention or love for a variety of reasons. I'm just not sure why. But I do think one of the real takeaways that I've had from this whole Platner mess and what I wrote about today is there are there's some upside to having a little political seasoning that we should acknowledge, right? It's going through a campaign and experiencing it, having had a vet going through the campaign and having an oppo file built on you, going through a campaign and having Republicans try to tear you down once or twice. It doesn't just build character, it makes sure that your record is pretty clean. And also, we shouldn't look necessarily at political experience being in politics as such a negative. Not everyone who is in politics is utterly cynical and awful and a corporate shill and a sellout. There are good people who are in politics, and it shouldn't be like a scarlet letter that folks wear. And it doesn't mean you need to back Janet Mills if you're a Maine Democrat. I mean, no one's saying that, but this notion that anyone who's ever held elected office is suspect, I think people need to reassess their priors now.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And then to also judge their record when they were in that office, because they can do things that you like or they can do things that you're not into. But knowing how it works and also knowing your way around the machine is a good thing. I mean, too often, and this is the last thing that I want to say specifically about the Platner thing. I'm using you also as a bit of a therapy session because
it's okay. I'm here for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I invited you, because Scott would be like, I don't want to hear about this. He'd be like, don't you have a husband that you could talk to about your feelings? I'm just kidding. Scott's great about my feelings. But it has been way too hard to express how you're feeling about someone like Graham Platner. And that's part of how the party functions right now, that it's just the purity tests and if you don't get on board, we're coming after you. And it's been upsetting to me, especially as a Jewish person, to have to find a way to kind of shape shift into a Totenkopf is okay. And I did believe that he didn't know what it was when he got it, but he definitely lied about when he found out what it was and then left it on and partied with it for several years. And so I felt that I was really boxed into a corner in making my arguments, especially, at Fox, where, this is catnip, right? You have a guy literally with a Nazi tattoo who, we thought it was just threw someone into a room and, pulled her arm behind her back, but now credible sexual assault, rape allegation, whatever you want to call it. There's just it just shouldn't be this hard, right? You just say, this isn't the guy. And then there was a primary, and he was the choice of the voters. And it took me back, and you guys had huge amounts of internal conversation with us between Tim and Sarah and yourself about how Trumpian do you get about this, right? How much do you just say, well, the people like him, and where do our standards go, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm going to get on the couch.
Jump in.
Support for the show comes from ZBiotics. When it comes to a night with drinks, there's always a give and take. Being in rough shape the next day just comes with the territory. Well, with pre-alcohol, that no longer needs to be the case. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I began taking ZBiotics before they were an advertiser. I like to drink. I am cutting down pretty dramatically as I get older, but when I do go out, I start the evening with ZBiotics. With pre-alcohol, you don't need to choose between a great night and a great next day. July is packed with barbecues, fireworks, and late Saturday nights with friends. Keep the good times rolling into the next day. Drink pre-alcohol before you go out and wake up ready for whatever Sunday brings. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/moderates and use the code moderates at checkout for 15% off.
Sarah Longwell and I had a pretty long podcast about this after the first New York Times story. More or less, I was like, yeah, I am like really conflicted. And I think it's okay to be like conflicted. Like, we don't have to be so certain. I mean, obviously the online political discourse and certainly the jobs you and I have, you more than me, on cable, it makes you have like, makes you take incredibly certain positions. And you're kind of like compelled to speak with conviction and make your point without sort of acknowledging that you might have self-doubt or nuance. And for me, Platner really kind of exposed a lot of kind of like these tricky questions that you go about when you judge people who are running for elected office, and how much leeway you give them, and how you judge a vote based on character versus political outcomes and things like that. And, there was a real discomfort I felt with the guy for a variety of reasons, but I understood simultaneously that, like, there are other objectives out there. There are other calculations to be made, control of the Senate being one of them. The will of the Maine voters obviously being one of them. The idea that people can, in fact, change and improve over their lives and grow. The idea that, serving in a war overseas, which I've never done and can't even possibly comprehend, might actually emotionally impact people in ways that are incomprehensible to me. So, like, all that stuff was in my head at the time. Now I've gotten to a place, obviously, with more revelations where, there's more clarity to how I feel about this. And this latest story really is a bar above what the Times reported when he was engaged in what appeared to be an act of domestic violence. This is like far worse. And, I'm just discomforted by the entire idea to the point where it's like quite easy and clear for me to speak out about it. I will say this, some of the stuff around, you mentioned like, well, how Trumpy should you be? Like, I do think that's kind of underappreciated in a way, right? Like, I do think Democrats, Sarah saw this in her focus groups, and there's like a really interesting piece up that we put up last night about Maine Democratic focus groups. They were like, look,
I read it.
They're like, look, he can do whatever. There's one line he can't cross, and that's sexual assault. Well, he crossed it, it appears. But even in that moment, like, there were people in the focus groups who were like, you know what? Fuck the Republicans. Like, they all rallied behind Donald Trump. They set a new standard. Like, this is not, why are we playing by an entirely different set of rules? And like, I get it. I do. But like, also at some point, the identity of your soul and the soul of the party kind of do materially matter. And I think you do have to say, if you want to make a distinction between yourself and Republicans on values and character, like, this is where you have to draw those distinctions.
Yeah, I read the piece, and I've listened to you guys talking about it a lot. And that is, I guess, where I felt like my line was, where I would stop saying, you know what I really want? I want that seat. And I know that Graham Platner will not vote for a new Supreme Court justice, and how Collins handled Kavanaugh is something that really sticks with me, that she still runs around, being like, oh, I'm pro-choice, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it. These stories came out actually in a way that protects the party more than they needed to, right? And Jenny Rassicott is a Democrat. She talks about how conflicted she was in doing this because she wants to win, right? Like, she wants Susancollins out. And for her to be replaced by someone with her political values, it was an issue of her human values. Right. And obviously something specifically happened to her. And Lindsay Fifield said the same thing, where she said, I'm giving you time. Right. Like, you have an out clause, essentially. And I guess we should just be thankful that it is possible that we will have a candidate who could maybe beat Susancollins. But this has a lot of lessons, I think, for the party, in how we select people, how we treat each other within this larger tent that everybody is working to make as accommodating as possible to people with similar underlying values, but different policy preferences or action plans, however you want to see it. And it feels like we need like a massive couch under the tent for everybody right now. Like, Neera Tanden and Hassan Piker need to get on like little couches next to each other and just like figure out how we're going to do this. Because That's the weirdest image.
But so much of it, don't you feel like so much of this is just like, I mean, this is not obviously
Twitter.
all of it. Yeah, it's just like the perniciousness of the online discourse. I mean, there's no way to conduct a conversation around this stuff online. It's just, it's awful. It's just kindling for the worst.
And the tweets last forever, as we're seeing from some pals are getting raked over the proverbial coals. I want to talk about Mitch McConnell, who went into the hospital 3 weeks ago. Initially, Senator Thune said, or I should say Leader Thune, he's doing well. Now there's been no communication with him. Allegedly, Mike Lee posted, he's like, we have no idea what's going on. His wife is in China. His daughter has deleted her Twitter account. There are rumors swirling that he is brain dead. That has not been confirmed by a news outlet, as far as I know. But everyone is asking questions suddenly. I don't know why they weren't asking questions 2 weeks ago. The way that the rules work in Kentucky, if we don't know that he can't fulfill his duties before August 3rd, then there would be a special election. It used to be an appointment, like Andybeshear would get to appoint, then there would be a special election. Now, those rules have changed. So if it's after August 3rd, then nothing happens. And I've read that the Republicans want to make sure that Thomas Massie doesn't get in there, run as a D/I candidate, right? And so what do you think is going on with Mitch McConnell?
No one knows. And I mean, look, he was obviously in horrible health prior to this episode. He had multiple episodes of falling. If anyone who was walking around on the Hill, our congressional correspondent, would note he looked terrible. He was then put in a wheelchair and pushed around. He seemed absent mentally. He obviously had a couple episodes a few years back where he just went vacant. So, not great, obviously. 84. And clearly at this juncture, incapable of doing the job. Can he return? I mean, I suppose, but there's not really much of a track record for people like turning it around at this age, at this condition. And it just gets back to sort of, I mean, I'm not trying to tie everything into a neat little bow, but let me try. There's like an immense selfishness, I feel like, among people in politics. And I suppose that's part of the business. Like, you have to have an incredible ego to feel like you deserve to serve the people and that they should elect you and all this stuff. And then when you do get elected, whether it's majority leader of the Senate or president of the United States, you certainly have an ego because you are elected. But the idea that you would hold on and do what you're doing, or continue to run, in Platner's case, continue to run for office knowing that these things are out there, that like you're so special that only you can do this and only you can withstand the scrutiny, that, basically like humanity depends on you sticking it out. It's incredibly selfish. And right now, the people of Kentucky have one senator, one person voting for them. And we don't know when they'll get another one. And I find that like ridiculous. We were supposed to be representative democracy, and that means you have people who are there to represent you. And Mitch McConnell probably almost certainly should not have run for re-election the last time, and now he's in a world of hurt, and it's leaving people without the proper representation that they deserve. I don't know what is going on with him, but clearly it's a bad situation. And you would have thought that the whole Biden experience would have taught us to have more of a stern conversation about age in our political system, but we still need to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I understand everybody ages at a different rate, but even looking at, Chuck Grassley's posts, right, and he's still doing, all 99 counties, and his wife is still out in the cornfields and like all of the cute 72 years of marriage situation that they're doing, like, why don't people want to hang out with their families?
Right. Let's not ask. I don't know. Maybe
I don't know. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, or
some
go make a shit ton of money.
Yeah, go make money. Yeah. Well, they make money in office. They make money in office too nowadays.
Nailed it.
You need some hobbies for sure. Like, I agree. Like Chuck Grassley, like I'm proud of him. He's got his little vacuum that he's always tweeting about and things like that. He seems pretty young for a 90 whatever year old. But like, go do something else. Like, this can't be it. And honestly, like, you are not Like, I was not gonna like fall apart if you are not at center. Yeah, you're probably bringing home a bunch of stuff to the state because of your seniority, and it does benefit them. But like at some point, you should just hand off the responsibilities to someone else, and that's true of a lot of people across the spectrum.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I hope that lessons will be learned by the next election.
I doubt it.
Well, I think that to some degree, this faction that we're talking about, like whether you want to call it the DSA left or progressive left or whatever, is going to be so loud that it'll be really tough to not do that. Like, I can't see a scenario where Chuck Schumer can keep going and run for reelection again here.
No, but how old is Bernie Sanders?
100.
84. I just looked it up. They're not going to push him out. I mean, it's always,
it's always the good age. Yeah. It's like, who has my politics? And like, and I mean, Elizabeth Warren with her Pond's cream, she looks like she's 50. So
she looks pretty good. Yeah, I'll give her that.
She looks awesome.
Yeah.
I want to hop over to Michigan. Similar themes of what we're talking about. So now we're down to 2 candidates, Haleystevens and Abdul El-Sayed. This race now, I think, is like the perfect microcosm of the tension within the party, right? Like Chuck Schumer and the DSCC, like everyone establishment-y lining up behind Haleystevens, Abdul El-Sayed getting the progressive left, and some like normie endorsements too, but seems to have a lot of momentum on his side. Do you think that, like, up until now, and I rarely say this, I shouldn't say that. I like a lot of what Rahm Emanuel says, but I particularly liked when he said that these districts are going from blue to cobalt blue, right? Like what's happening in New York City, for instance, or, Colorado's 1st district, right? Like these were already D plus 50 seats or whatever. But do you think that the DSA style left can pull off a statewide win like in a Michigan?
So you're saying in a general or in a primary?
Both.
Okay. Yeah. I think, look, in a primary for sure. I'll say
so you expect him to win?
I mean, I haven't pulled up my Kalshi odds recently, but yeah.
Okay. But I mean, it's just, you pay attention to it like as much as I do. Yeah.
So I would, at this juncture, and I trust, so we have a reporter here, Jonathan Cohn, who's based in Michigan. He's been into a bunch of these rallies, and he's got his sort of finger to the pulse of what's going on there more than I do. And his take is like, there's one person who's campaigning with joy and purpose and energy and vigor and excitement. And there's another person who is campaigning, not scared, but like tentatively and trying to like hold the coalition together. And usually like that's kind of an interesting indication of where the winds are blowing. And his take is that El-Sayed is like, in a better spot. Now, he also believes that he actually is underrated as a general election candidate, that there was a lot of angst about it for obvious reasons. I mean, you don't need to like be a genius to understand why. But that like, he's a very accomplished campaigner and that he can actually, he's not as big a liability as some conventionalism holds. To your point, Michigan's a different testing ground than New York City or that district in Colorado because it is a purple state. But the primary electorate, even in these purple states, are trending more left. And this is, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush because I do think there's plenty of examples we could turn to where more moderate or district-friendly candidates were winning their primaries. I mean, you can even look back at, when Zoran won his mayoral election, the 2 governors who won for Democrats were normie Dems, right? Like, and that was Jersey and Virginia. So I'm still not at the point where it's like, oh, we're in a full-blown DSA takeover. I don't think that's true. But I do think in a state like Michigan at this point in time, given the dynamics, and I think it's fair to say Haleystevens has not run the best campaign ever, that he definitely is the favorite at this point.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, the big takeaway from recent election nights for me were, like Kate Conley, who's going to run against Mike Lawler and hopefully beat him, Bob Brooks in Pennsylvania, this, the blue collar brigade. Like, they're still not they're not potentially in position to flip seats, which is what we need to do, or to hold a tough seat. And that's what this Michigan seat is. I mean, Mike Rogers is a pretty good candidate. He only lost to Slotkin by 1.5, 2 points. Like, it was very close. And I think that that's, folks' anxiety. Like, you get to the general and people are just like, this is
like if you don't win this, if you don't win this in your
right,
Democrats,
like Maine doesn't matter, right? Like, we're talking about, Josh Turek, and it's like, oh, you couldn't even hold Michigan.
Support for the show comes from Quo. Missed calls and slow follow-ups are silent killers, and that's how businesses leave money on the table without ever even realizing it. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo isn't just a phone system, it's a smart system. AI automatically logs calls, generates summaries, and flags next steps so nothing falls through the cracks. And it can even qualify leads or respond after hours so your business stays on even when you're off. Quo works wherever you are, right from your phone or computer. Keep your existing number, add teammates in minutes, sync your CRM, and let the call routing handle itself as you scale. With Quo, calls, text, voicemails, transcripts, and contact details are all in one clean view, so your entire team can handle calls and texts from one shared number. No more missed messages or disconnected conversations. Everyone sees the full thread, making replies faster, and customers feel genuinely cared for. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/moderates. That's QUO.com/moderates.
I already got into this a tiny bit. Well, I mentioned Rahm Emanuel, and we talked about, or we said Israel, so now I want to mash them together because he is in Israel, and he's going to give a big speech, which he has leaked early so that we can all talk about it on podcasts like this. And it very much represents a departure for Rahm and how he talks about Israel and, I guess, what a Rahm Emanuel presidency would look like vis-a-vis Israel. Certainly stopping aid is something that's become pretty mainstream within the party. I think there were only 8 senators that voted to keep sending offensive aid to Israel, needs major changes to the government. This is in his speech. I feel as a liberal Jew that this is a very helpful thing that he's doing, that he's changing the bar for what, Zionists can say and think about Israel and what their policy platform would look like, but curious what your read on it is.
Well, I agree with you that it's helpful to see, and I think whether you think Rahm's trying to catch up to trends or getting ahead of them, like whatever, I think this is a low-key important moment. I'm also sort of the mindset that we should consider it kind of low-hanging fruit at this point in time. I mean, Netanyahu himself has been like, yeah, you can cut off aid, we're fine, we should be independent. So it's like, okay, cool, let's do it. Also, Netanyahu is like, ignoring the country's Supreme Court at this point in time. And if you can't be like, actually, that's not really good ethical behavior for a government, we shouldn't support that, then like, you got problems. And, obviously, look, put it this way. I'm of the mindset as an American Jew who loves Israel, who was bar mitzvahed in Israel, who believes Israel should be a state, that there should be a Jewish state, that it is inherently important and healthy for Jewish people to be critical of Israel when Israel does things wrong. The idea that you should just be lockstep supportive of Israel because you are Jewish is fundamentally wrong, honestly, because there is an important independent mindset that is part of the Jewish experience, and there's an important element of self-criticism that is part of the Jewish experience, and you cannot simply just say, well, because it's Israel, because I'm Jewish, therefore I must support what Israel's doing. That's a dangerous path to go down. And so Rahm obviously is Jewish. He's obviously doing this in political context, but I think there's something greater to this, which is you need to get into a place where you treat criticism of Israel as actually supporting the idea of Israel. And that's where my head's at.
Do you think that so I agree with I wasn't actually bat mitzvahed, much to everyone's disappointment, let alone in Israel. No, I know.
There's still time.
Yes, it is low-hanging fruit. And I guess, do you think that this kind of litmus test of is Israel creating a genocide going to go away if everybody shifts to Rahm's position now, or Slotkin's, or John Ossoff's, or Warnock, like any of the kind of the fighter normies. I don't even know what to call this cohort, right? Like, they're the ones that clearly understand the moment, but also win in purple places and know that a coalition has to be built from the far, far left to moderate Republicans. Essentially, like, that's our tent now.
Yeah, I think they're always going to, it diffuses some of it, but I'm pretty sure that there will always be some litmus test, right? It's like, okay, it was, cutting off aid to Israel was a litmus test, but now that everyone's for it, well, will you say that what happened in Gaza is genocide? And that's the new litmus test, and if you can use that word or not. Or, should, the Netanyahu administration be prosecuted for this in the International Criminal Court? Like, is that a litmus test? There's always going to be some sort of level at which point someone can distinguish themselves. And I do think, as noted in our Platner discussion, the degree to which this was an animating purpose of his candidacy. I mean, he, even in like the depths of the scandals that came prior to the latest one, his retort was often, well, Apex, behind the scenes trying to, engineer my demise, and they support Susancollins and all that stuff. It's like, that was his boogeyman. So I do think it's helpful to see, it's helpful on just a strictly policy grounds to see Rahm and others take a position that is in line with the Netanyahu government's position, but also makes logical sense at this juncture to slow down military aid to Israel. I don't think it's going to solve all the issues that necessarily he'll have with the base.
No, I think, it's almost, in some ways, it helps him, but he is also helping other people who would honestly occupy the same lane.
He's saying it's okay to do this. I'll show you the way. And if I can do it, certainly you can do it. Yeah.
Right. As someone who also relies heavily on his Jewish heritage and his, family's immigrant story and all of it, it is definitely.
And we do have two other very prominent Jewish Democrats out there and waiting to decide about what to do in 2028. And that's Josh Shapiro and John Ossoff, obviously. Ossoff obviously has an election beforehand, but it is going to be interesting to see how they navigate these waters too.
Yeah, I mean, and Slotkin is Jewish too. And she certainly seems like she's interested in being in the conversation. Yes, Josh Shapiro for sure. And I find a lot of people don't seem to know that John Ossoff is Jewish. So sorry we blew your cover.
Hey, it's not blowing. You're not blowing a cover. You're promoting a good. Here we go.
Yeah, you always got to amplify the tribe. Did Donald Trump curse the U.S. men's soccer team? Like the Knicks first, like his one game he goes, but like how disappointing was last night, and how terrible do you think Flo felt through the whole thing? I saw the Belgian coach saying like he came to talk to me afterwards and he's such a good guy and he knew how terrible the whole situation was. It's like, it's just too much.
Yeah. Well, I'll use the word curse, sure. But like, there was like a lot of great vibes happening with the team, even with the red card. It was like a shitty thing to happen. And, the call itself was relatively controversial, but, people who I don't pay that close attention, but people who do were like, yeah, like you can see why they gave a red card. And you just got to kind of live with it, but you could also use it to your advantage. We're being, we're undermanned, but we're going to fight back and we're going to, we're going to like stick it to the Belgium. And then Trump intervenes and he turns the entire script, all the sort of momentum that we had on its head. And suddenly we're the ones manipulating the rules so that our best striker can get on the field. And we become the object of ridicule and anger as opposed to the object of fascination and passion. And I do think that matters. I think there was like, whether or not people need additional motivation in the World Cup, who knows? But goddamn, like the Belgian players seem to be extra motivated to like stick it to us. And when their striker hit the fourth goal in extra time and did the little Trump dance and sent an FU to the crowd, you could tell like they wanted to they didn't want to just beat us. They wanted to humiliate us. They didn't have to do the fourth goal. We had lost. They could have gone into the corner and kicked it around and wasted some time, but they absolutely wanted to destroy us and they wanted to humiliate Trump. So yeah, I think the president stepped in it. I'm willing to say that.
That's very bold of you.
Yeah.
Also say that the Belgians posted overturn this.
Yeah,
Just
I saw that one.
But on a meta level, and you have little kids as well, and like I don't know how old they are.
6 and 9.
6 and 9. Okay, so I'm behind you at 4 and 2, but like they're starting to. The 4-year-old at least is starting to like things, right? Like she likes gymnastics more than she likes soccer, and like we're figuring it all out.
Sure.
And I think there is an important lesson out of this World Cup about youth sports culture here and how prohibitively expensive and difficult we make it for kids to get into it. Like in other countries, they invite you and they provide you with all the gear that they need, and they'll pick you up and take you to make sure that you can participate in these things. There's like real community behind it. Like that was the project in Norway, right? And look where they ended up out of this. I mean, I know that this is kind of like a miracle run for them, but I was thinking about that aspect of it, that like it's too hard to engage on a competitive level with these sports. Like the stories of what families have to do to get their kids to like AAU basketball or, football, et cetera. It's harrowing stuff, especially if you don't have means.
No doubt about that. Youth sports culture is, it's horrifying. I say that as someone who coached my eldest's baseball team for the past couple of years. And I found myself like, I was like trying to guard against like doing the over competitive coach dad thing. But like, I was like, I got admonished by the umpires for like getting upset at some of the balls and strikes. And I'm like reading the emails that I'm getting from like, what is happening to me? I got to stop this. But it does sort of, it is a factory, put it that way. And so when you're young and you want to like, get into sports, it's almost like you can't, unless you're like really good and exceptional at it, you can't really do it. And then on top of that, the financial resources and the parental commitments, like one of my kids is on a swim team and it's awful. I mean, he's luckily he's good enough at swimming that it's like you can watch it and enjoy it. But to the folks out there who have kids, do not do swimming. It is the worst parenting experience. You do 3 hours of sitting at an overheated pool. It's muggy and miserable, and you watch your kids for like 30 seconds twice in those 3 hours, and that's it. That's it. And so, anyways, your point is valid. It's a huge commitment, but the real victims are the parents.
Always us. Also, swim is so early in the morning, throughout
awful.
Life. And I want to.
Did you swim?
No, I played tennis through college, and I thought about this a lot. Obviously, we had the Williams sisters, but there's been huge racial barriers to tennis, right? And I'm watching Coco Gauff at Wimbledon, and I'm just like, think how many Coco Gauffs there probably were out there who just were not given the access, or we didn't make these incredible sports and these incredible communities available to them. And like, maybe we would have won that game. I don't know. Everything Trump touches. Mark Elias said yesterday, he's like, everything Trump touches turns corrupt. It's not that it dies. It just turns corrupt.
Well, he corrupts it. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. Sam Stein, it was awesome to have you. Thank you for joining me.
Jessica, this was a life experience for me. I'm so happy.
The therapy?
I've been waiting for this invite for months, maybe years, and I finally got it, and I was circling on my calendar, and now that it's happened, it lived up to the expectations.
Good? Yeah?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Thank you.
You'll do it again?
No.